All right, so today we're going to start a new teaching. Yeah. All right, and it's one that I've wanted to do for a long time, and it's going to be on the topic of honor and shame. And there was much rejoicing. Okay. All right, so this is going to be not like some of the other teachers you see out there, simply because I did not go and put together a huge historical presentation about honor and shame societies and how that all was. What you need to know, though, is that we are in a newer time frame where societies are not honor-shame based as much as they were before. Okay, you still have honor and shame as a big deal in some communities and even in some cultures in some countries, but not like it used to be. It was much more prevalent in a lot of places, and it was much more serious, okay, in a lot of places. It's still that way in certain belief systems, but this was a big deal in the region we call the Middle East, where Israel is located and where Yeshua and the disciples all grew up and lived. And so it's important that we understand that honor and shame is a status. Whether you were in a status of being honorable or being honored or receiving honor, or the status of being in a status called shame. Okay, and so you can either be shamed or you can be giving or creating shame on others or bringing shame to others. You can be honored or you can be bringing honor to others. It's a status that was very critically important in the days of our scriptures, in the biblical times. And it's talked about quite a bit in your scriptures. And so I know it's hard at times for us to go back and look at these things from the point of view of being where they are at that time, because we just have not lived in that world. But you have to understand that world to some degree. So there are other teachers you can go find and listen to that will give you a much more extensive hour or more of historical understanding of honor and shame, okay? And so what this is really important for us to understand, and this is what we're going to look to do in this study, is we're going to come to understand honor and shame as primary status markers in ancient times, to understand, to come to a greater and deeper understanding of the honor and esteem of the Father and the Son. So we're going to see the words honor and esteem and glory all kind of interchangeably based on how the words are translated, but they're essentially the same words. We're going to come to see Yeshua seeking to bring honor and esteem to the Father and see the Father esteeming him. So we're going to see how that whole flow goes. Honor and shame is something that is not static. It flows from one to another. Okay, you can receive honor. You can give honor. You can bring shame. You can bring either to yourself or to others, okay? We're going to come to discern how this was done. How did Yeshua seek to bring honor to the Father and the Father esteem him back? So we're going to come to discern how this was done so that we can imitate Yeshua in both esteeming the Father and in receiving esteem from the Father. Because after all, that is the whole point of duplication, about becoming Talmidim, about becoming disciples, is that we should, like him, behave, act, so that we receive the same as he received, so we bear the fruits the same as he brought forth fruit. We're going to come to discover that it is the manner in which we respond to our calling, respond to their calling. They call us, and how we respond to their calling, how we respond to their guidance and instruction, that this is what will determine whether or not we are either receiving honor or shame in their eyes. Let me say that again, because I butchered it pretty bad. We're going to discover that it's the manner in which we respond to their calling, guidance, and instruction that will bring us either honor or shame in their eyes. I think that's what we're going to find is really critical to the flow of all this. And we're going to come to learn about the importance of the transfer of honor and shame to others. Because what you do doesn't just affect you. It affects others. Now, I know a lot of times we want to look at it from the wrong perspective. We want to look at it from what you do, and we point to the other person, affects others, and you're pointing at yourself. No, focus on what you, point the fingers at you do, and how that affects others. Because a lot of us will get all over the internet and all over everything else and our friends because we're thinking about what they do affecting us. Worry about the plank in your own eyes. That's not to say that what they do doesn't affect you, but you've got enough to work on. Okay, that's going to be a very important piece of this, okay? So these are things that I'm hoping that we're going to come to understand during this study, okay? How does the world we live in today see the concepts of honor and shame? What criteria are they using to determine each? What are their measuring sticks and standards? It seems to me that before we do any of this, we're going to have to figure out what these two words mean. And then we'll try to answer that question a little bit. So what is honor? Okay? And it's really funny how some words that when you go to compare them may have a lot of information and definition, and some may have a small. Shame is going to be really simple, just a few ways to describe it. Honor is going to be much more complex. So what is honor? Honor is high respect, great esteem. And think of esteem, because a lot of times we look in the translation that a lot of us use, the ISR translation, and it uses the word esteem. So esteem is a combination of respect plus admiration. Okay, let's simplify that, which is another word that we could use, honor. Okay, esteem has the idea of respect plus admiration. Okay, what else is honor? It's a good name or reputation. Adherence to what is right or to a conventional standard of conduct. Now bear in mind, I got this from a combination of dictionary definitions. We're going to say that how those apply scripturally. So here it has to do with the adherence to what is right or to a covenantal standard of conduct. I'm changing the wording from conventional because conventional means that society gets to determine, which is why we think that there's no shame today. That's not true. Just whatever people think is shameful is stuff that, we would not necessarily think is well, let me rephrase that. The things that people think is not shameful, we would think is shameful. And to finally get to what they think was shameful, well, man, there were lots of levels before that we think would have been shameful before we got there. Okay, the bar has moved quite a bit. So let's change that to honor scripturally is adherence to what is right or to a covenantal standard of conduct. I put the word covenantal in instead of conventional. Honor is to do what is required by something such as a promise or contract. In other words, it is honorable to do and keep the covenant. Okay? So you're honoring an agreement. That's a phrase we would use, to honor an agreement. So what's the agreement we all made? We just spent 55 parts, a whole year talking about it. It's called the covenant. Honor is something regarded as a rare opportunity and bringing pride and pleasure a privilege. So it's an honor to be selected for something. It's an honor or a privilege to be called now. It's an honor or privilege to be eyes opened, ears opened, heart opened now. Now, it's not an honor to have it happen. He's going to do it to everybody at some point. He's done it to lots of people before he ever did it to you. He's doing it to lots of people now. But it's an honor or privilege to have it happen now in this lifetime before the millennium when all things are actually at the hardest, most challenging. So don't get frustrated about your calling. Don't whine and complain about it. Feel honored. Why do you have to call me now when I'm broke and I've got all this psycho-emotional junk and, I've got, as somebody said during the prayer time, I've got toxic stuff in my attic, above the chin, below the hairline, the attic, okay? I mean, why would he call me with all this stuff? Be honored, privileged that you were given this rare opportunity. And it is rare. How many people that you know, percentage-wise, understand and can see what you see? Is it a large percentage? Is it even like a reasonably small percentage? No, it's like microscopic. Some of you don't know anybody that's not in this room or on live stream right now. You don't know anybody else that actually can see what you see. Some of you, before you found us, didn't know anybody else because you said it to me. I thought I was all by myself. I've had people say that all the time. I thought I was alone. But you have a rare opportunity. Not rare ultimately, but rare in the timing, that you're getting it now, during this time. Honor is a thing conferred as a distinction, especially an official award for bravery or achievement. So when you go through a trial and you pass through it successfully, in other words, you learn the lesson of it, you brought forth fruit of the Spirit during it, you counted it joy, you did whatever it was, you bring honor and you receive honor for the achievement. So it brings honor when you go through a challenge. We see this, and we will see it when we read some of the verses about Yeshua. We're going to start actually very unusual for me. We'll start in the Brit, and we'll look at Yeshua's life. But that's part of what happened when he went out for this little discussion with the devil. He brought on himself a lot of honor because of the way he handled that discussion. It was an achievement. He was tested. He passed the test. This brought honor from above, okay? But you need to understand that the beginning of what I said in that sense was it's a special distinction, okay? This is why we're told to do things like to figure out what's well-pleasing in our Father's sight. Why? Because it brings you honor, and it honors Him. We're going to see that honor is one whose worth brings fame or respect to something or someone. So you receive honor by bringing fame and respect and honor to another. So Yeshua is always there pointing how He's there to bring honor to His Father. So it's not about you seeking honor from the public. And we're going to see there's a huge difference in Scripture between seeking honor from men, seeking the esteem of men, and seeking esteem from above. Because we talked about it in the introduction here when we said we're going to see Yeshua seeking to bring honor and esteem to the Father and see the Father then giving honor and esteem to the Son. There's a way this thing flows, okay? And it flows by you first seeking to bring honor, to give and bestow honor, and then have it brought to you, okay? You don't seek to receive it, okay? You seek to do what will then receive it, so that because you're giving and doing what's honorable. It's an evidence or symbol of distinction. And so they give somebody something that demonstrates, look, you know what? It's an honor to wear tzitzit. It's an honor to keep Shabbat. Because these are symbols that people can see that are a distinction that makes you different. Wear them well. It's an honor. Honor is also defined as a keen sense of ethical conduct. So the key word there for us is keen, because we already talked about that it was adherence to what is right according to a covenantal standard. Okay? But it's having that keen. What is keen? It has the idea of being very sharp. Having a very sharp, and it's not just sharp, but it's well honed. Time was spent in getting that blade or that edge to be sharp. A meticulousness in the effort to make it sharp. So you have this keen sense of ethical conduct. But now bear in mind that this is not a keen sense. All you blues, calm down. Because you're all thinking, that's what I am. I'm all excited about everybody being ethical. No. This is not your standard we're talking about. All of you blues have a very keen standard of ethical beliefs, okay? Keen sense of ethical conduct. No, we're just talking about that which is put forth in the Torah. Okay? Okay. For those of you watching, go, why is he talking about blues? It's a personality test thing, was using 4 colors and whatever. Okay, never mind. You'll figure it out if you listen to enough of the teachings. Okay, but we are to have a very well-honed and sharp sense of what is right and wrong according to the one we're trying to bring honor to. So then it's not your standard. It's not your code of conduct. It's his, okay? And in doing so, this keen sense of ethical conduct applies to only you. You don't get to impose it on anybody else. This is really talking about you and the honor you might receive because you're giving honor by adhering to somebody else's, in this case Yahweh's, code of conduct, all right? Because a lot of you have this keen sense of ethical conduct, and that's your excuse for blasting people on Facebook and doing the things you do on YouTube, whatever it is, on social media. You're doing these things because You have this keen sense of what's right and wrong, and you want to embarrass and shame. You're trying to shame others. We're going to talk about what shame is here in a minute. But see, those who are seeking honor are not seeking to shame others. Okay? They'll do just fine bringing plenty of shame on themselves. They don't need your help. I mean, that's just the simple truth. They don't need your help doing that. Honor is one's word given as a guarantee of performance. In other words, keeping your promises brings honor. Your word being your word. To live up to or fulfill the obligations of, okay? So if you are covenanted, you've obligated yourself to certain things. Living up to and keeping your obligations, fulfilling your obligations is something that brings honor. And it also honors the one who you covenanted or contracted with. To respect, worship, or accept someone or something. Okay, so there's a lot of respect connected to honor. To show admiration for someone or something in a public way. So this is also something that's done in a public way. You're not just doing it hidden in a box. You're not doing this only at your home. When people are watching you out in public, are you behaving in such a manner that brings honor publicly to the one you claim to be giving honor to? So are you showing admiration in a public way? So when your boss says, I need you to work on Saturday, are you going to honor your boss? You're going to honor the company? You're going to honor Yahweh? Your mother wants you to do blah, blah, blah. This happens a lot in the wintertime here where mothers call people up and say, you got to come over for Christmas dinner. All right. You're going to honor mom? You're going to honor Yahweh. Where are you giving the honor to? Whose admiration are you dealing with here? To regard with great respect, to fulfill an obligation or keep an agreement, honesty, fairness, or having integrity in one's belief and actions. There's honor in that. There's honor in having honesty, fairness, and integrity in your belief and actions. Okay? High respect as for worth, merit, or rank. So that's an authority thing right there. You have an honor the person's position. When you usurp, that's very shameful. That's dishonoring. Usurping is completely a shameful and dishonoring thing. Submission to an authority of appropriate rank and knowing your place. In other words, knowing your place. Now, I know that might have triggered some of the ladies having heard that for a long time. You need to be in your place. That's not what we're talking about. Everybody has a place. Men, women, children, within different structures. Your place may be different, by the way, depending on who you're with. Because it has to do with assessing in the room who's got what rank, so to speak. Okay, I've been in places where there were a lot of ranking people. You could have this opportunity in the military. You could have this in business. You could have it in, a martial arts place where you've got a bunch of belts and you look around and you figure out, okay, who's the highest rank? And where do I fit in the rank? You have to have a quick way of assessing where you belong in that, I don't want to call it pecking order, but you understand what I'm saying? And then you are going to only be receiving honor if you are respectful and understanding where you belong in that rank. And so how you treat those in higher rank and how you are treating those in lower rank. Because those in lower rank need you to recognize what they're doing so you can bestow honor. And those in higher rank need you to treat them appropriately so they can bestow honor on you. You see the flow. Okay? This is very, very important. High public esteem, in other words, respect and admiration, fame or glory, that's mentioned just so we understand the fullness of honor, because some of the huge things that Yeshua did, he did as demonstrations to bring him a certain amount of accolade publicly so people would know he was there. And some of the things that you see Yahweh doing was so that everybody saw he was there, like what he did to Egypt. Okay? To revere, to regard with respect, tinged with awe. Okay? As when we are honoring somebody, there's a regard with respect, sometimes tinged with some awe. Okay? Now, That's a lot for the word honor. And I'm sure you remembered everything I said. So we might have to bring that back occasionally. Now let's look at shame. By the way, when we looked at honor, does that sound like something you would desire? Can you see why we should seek after? But how do we seek after? We're not seeking after by saying, hey, look at me, look at me. No, we seek after it by doing the things I listed, which in doing so would motivate appropriately the person who's higher up to want to bestow honor upon you. And that's when you hear something like, well done, you good and trustworthy servant. That's a sentence of bestowing honor. Now the servant did the well-doing. And then he didn't walk around going, okay, what do you think? I'm great, right? No, the servant just did the servant thing. And the master looked and said, well done. Enter into the joy of your master. Good job. Okay? Shame. Shame is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. You're not going to feel ashamed if you don't think you did anything wrong. You're not going to have any sense of shame if you don't think you did anything wrong. Now, in the societal honor and shame type of societies, it wouldn't matter what you thought or not. You would be labeled in a way that people would know you had shame. By the way, this is the point of the whole way that Yeshua was killed. The crucifying thing was meant to be the most shameful way to be killed. It was to bring shame on the family, shame on the person. It was a public humiliation in the greatest sense. There's a lot easier ways to kill somebody, okay? So shame is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of the wrong or foolish behavior. So you have to deal with that shame. Now, we're going to come to see that Yeshua came to bear your shame. So not only can honor be bestowed, but shame can be taken from. If you would only just let it go. Okay, because people will say, well, why did Yeshua have to die? Why did he have to go through that? Because it wasn't about your sins. Sins can be forgiven through lots of methods. We call them repentance, forgive sin. He took upon himself your shame and the need for the ultimate death penalty. But yet some of you still walk around not able to communicate with your Creator, not able to do some things that you should be able to do because you're still ashamed. Remember we talked about own it, fix it, release it. Why do you need to release it? Because he's given the opportunity. He said, I did what I did to take your shame, to bear your shame, your painful feeling of humiliation, your distress caused by your very strong conscious feeling of being wrong and knowing how foolish and stupid you've been. The dumb stuff we all do. Shame is a loss of respect or esteem, dishonor. Obviously, the opposite of honor is to have dishonored. So you could take any of the things that I read you for honor and just reverse it, and that's going to bring shame. So you're in a situation, not knowing your place, not knowing your position in the rank is going to bring dishonor and shame. Not having high respect, not adhering to what's right and wrong according to covenant, not doing what is required, not appreciating the special distinction that was conferred, keep going on and on and on, not having evidence or some sort of a symbol of the fact that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, not having your word be your word when you give your word, not living up to your obligations, keep going all the way through. No honesty, no fairness, no integrity in what you do. These are all shameful things. Shame is also to make someone feel ashamed, to cause someone to be publicly shamed or disgraced. Go back to the divorce teaching on divorce, remarriage, and putting away. The putting away part was meant to be the greatest level of public shaming in a potential marriage situation. This is why it says that Yosef with Miriam said he was going to put her away quietly. He did not want to shame her publicly, even though what it looked like was that she had gotten pregnant outside of marriage. But he did not want to shame her. Okay? But putting away is a public shaming. And by the way, you see this with Israel. Okay, when Yahweh had to put them away, he publicly shamed them. He had another nation come and take them out. And they were so shameful, he did it to them twice. The northern kingdom first, then the southern kingdom. So double shame on the southern kingdom, having seen what happened to the northern kingdom. You would think they would have been paying attention. But what did? They've just brought shame on themselves. Okay? We are going to eventually get to, I'll mention a few things now, but we're going to eventually get to some of the stories probably. I don't know how this whole thing is going to go. I don't know how many parts it's going to be. We're not even going to guess. But the thing is, we're going to get to at some point looking at some of the Tanakh stories, because there's not a lot of verses as much like this is, I'm going to see in the Brit, about getting shame and honor and glory and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to see evidences of it. Like we could see when Adam and Chava ate of the tree, what did they say? They were ashamed. The first experiencing of recognizing that their honor was gone and they had brought shame on themselves. There's your very first negative emotion being expressed by human beings. They felt ashamed. Why did Cain kill Abel? Shame. And he was mad at his brother because he said, instead of owning that it was his fault that he was shamed, he blamed his brother for making him look bad. If you hadn't done it right, I wouldn't have looked bad. No, you still did it wrong. In that case, both of you would have been corrected. But you didn't deal with your shame. So a lot of this is going to be about understanding not only how to receive or what honor is and why you should seek it, but how you can avoid shame. Because shame is almost always going to come out of a response to a negative emotional state. That's the toxic stuff that's in your attic. I like that phrase. We're going to keep using it, I guess. All right? It's also in your heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, all action flows out of that abundance. How you deal with your shame. Why is David so well honored? Because he owned his shameful act, repented of it, and released it and moved on. He owned it fully, blamed nobody else. See, one of the first signs of how you handle your shame is if you're going to immediately try to defer it or deflect it in a different direction. But it's that person's fault, or they made me, or because of this other thing. Excuses is not going to work. The only way to deal with shame is to own it. And do whatever you can, if possible, to fix it, and then let it go. And you can let it go because Messiah gave you that opportunity. He said, I would be very happy and willing to bear your shame if you would just give it over to me, make teshuvah. But what do? When it says that you crucify him again when you sin, is because you went and did the same thing that shamed him in the first place. Now, shamed yourself that he had to take for you. This is why mainstream Christianity is just really in a really horrible place, really, in some ways, because the thing that brought all the shame was the sin. Yeshua died so he could take on the shame. He didn't die so he could take away the law. He's taking away the shame for your inability to submit to it. And so now they're telling everybody, go continue to act shameful, because after all, we don't understand anything about what he really did, is what they're really saying. Okay? After all, we really don't get it. Shame is to, so I said to make someone feel ashamed, to cause someone to be publicly shamed or disgraced, also to cause a perception of loss of respect or esteem. So sometimes the person is dealing with that negative emotion, and that's where the jealousy and all this envy and all that other stuff comes from, because sometimes they feel like what the person did in a public way, It's not just that they have something you don't have, but they did it maybe in a way that people compared you and them, and you think you fell short. And you were over here in this elevated rank, and all of a sudden people looking at a lower rank. It'd be like you're standing in the room, and you're a colonel, and all of a sudden, and you're running the show, and everybody looks at, and then the general walks in. And now you're all upset because you're outranked. And now all what you were getting treated with, now you've got to go ahead and lick a boot or two, so to speak. You understand what I'm saying? The shoe does that whole thing, the power switch. If you start off understanding correctly how power really works, you never have this problem. All power, glory, and honor above, you have an opportunity to serve. You're serving the one above you, or you're serving the ones below you. You're still serving either way. So there's no glory or honor or respect lost that you have to worry about. And again, that's part of your negative perceptions. That's not necessarily a reality. The only thing that would really cause you to lose respect, esteem, or be disgraced is what you do. But what happens is, though, somebody else does something, they seem to now be getting all this honor and all of this respect and all this admiration that you were getting before, and now you are feeling disgraced because, after all, that was yours. That was mine. How could they give it to? Okay? Now, Yahweh will tell you, if you give honor to other gods and not me, that is your disgrace. That is your shame. So then the shame is on the one who's giving honor if they're giving it to the wrong person. It's not about you losing it. You see how I just explained that? Okay, you're in a situation, somebody else comes into it, they seem to be then receiving. Maybe you should have been the one receiving. If you're not, the disgrace is on the person bestowing it on the wrong person. Yahweh says very clearly, do not bestow onto those what belongs to me. That's the whole big deal about idolatry. Honoring, esteeming another. He says, all that belongs to me. I made you. Okay? Is this making sense? Are we kind of getting this? These are the foundational pieces of this. All right? So that's all I have for shame. So shame only had like 4 bullet points, and I had like 47 for honor. Okay, so it's a lot of difference there. But we need to have this picture in our minds as we start to understand where we're going into the study. Now let's go ahead and start in John chapter 1. And I know this is going to surprise you, but we're going to read sometimes a whole bunch of verses to get to a single point, because you need the context. All right? We're going to start in chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was in the beginning with Elohim. All came to be through him, and without him not even one came to be that came to be. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Okay, so John, like others that we've done studies with before, is trying to make a case for something. He wants to make sure that by the time he starts talking about Yeshua, he has given you his foundational understanding that he wants you to have about who he's talking about. So that when he starts talking about him, you're thinking about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was the one that through him everything came to be, and the Word was with Elohim and was Elohim. He wants you to be thinking these things by the time he introduces us to Yeshua in verse 14, putting on the flesh suit. Okay? So all came to be through him, and without him not even one came to be that came to be. In him was life, and life was the light of men. And we're going to talk about at some point, I think we're going to do a teaching on the different terms for Yeshua: light, truth, life, way, all that kind of stuff. Would that be good? You want to maybe get into that? I was going to do something comparing light and darkness also. We'll see where that goes, but because you have that right here. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. And there's so many depths of metaphors here that we can get into. And there was a man, that he's going to talk about Yochanan the Immerser. He says, there was a man sent from Elohim, his name was Yochanan. This one came only as a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all might believe through him. Not through John, but through Yeshua. He was not that light, but that he might bear witness of the light. He was the true light. This is now talking about Yeshua again. See, sometimes the shift is so quick, you forget who is he talking about. Sometimes he's talking about Yeshua, sometimes talking about John. Okay? He was the true light which enlightens every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him, and the world did not know him. The world did not know him. What does know mean? A relationship. So the world did not have an appropriate relationship with him. They maybe knew about him, maybe heard about him. They didn't know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Who were his own? Everybody that he created. Because this is still before the flesh suit. This is still dealing with creation itself. He came to mankind, and they did not receive him. But it says, but as many throughout history that did receive him, to them he gave the authority to be called, to become the children of Elohim, to those believing in his authority, who were born not of blood, nor of desire of the flesh, nor of desire of men, but of Elohim. And I've explained these verses to you many times. In other words, it had nothing to do with, your bloodline, your genealogy, or just you wanted it real bad, or whatever. It had to do with covenanting. It had to do with relationship and submission. He said, who were born not of, he said, but it came to those who were believing in his authority. That's who it is. Okay, so they were born through a desire to submit, to believe in his name and his authority. They were not born because of any other thing. Because a lot of people in Christianity that want this really badly. They can't see it. A lot of people in every religion that want it really badly. They can't see it. So it's not about wanting it badly. That's where we go back to, do you know the Father and the Son, and seeing how he has to open your eyes, open your ears, open your heart so you can receive. He reveals. It says the Father reveals the Son, and the Son reveals the Father, to whom they choose, when they choose, how they choose. All right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to the Father and the Son teaching. Okay. Now we get to verse 14, and it says, and the Word, so all this time we've only been talking about the Word. The Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us, and we saw his esteem, his honor, the esteem or honor as of an only brought forth of a Father, complete in favor and truth. So we saw his esteem, his honor, because that's connected to your lineage. Okay, people talk about bringing shame to the family name and honor to the family name and that kind of a thing. They could see, those who could see, remember not everybody's seeing here, but those who could see could recognize that he was a brought forth of the Father. Anybody ever walk around and be like, that's not my kid? Or have a parent say that in front of you? Oh, that's not my kid. They're saying here, this was clear that he was brought forth of the Father. That's why he said over and over again, if you see me, you see the Father. If you don't believe me, believe the works, for the works are of the Father. In other words, it's that flow. I am evidencing and bearing and doing things that bring honor to him. So we saw his esteem, the esteem that would only be that would be brought forth, given to one that was brought forth of a Father. We saw an honor that was only bestowed on one the Father would have brought forth. Is that making some sense here? Okay? And then he says, complete in favor and truth. So now we're connecting esteem or honor and being complete in merited favor and in truth. So we had the mechanics of it, which was the truth, and the fullness of it, which is was what merited the favor. Because remember, a lot of people had the mechanics and still were laid low in the desert. They had the mechanical stuff, they did not have what merited favor. Doing the mechanics doesn't merit any favor. That goes really to, if you ever wondered about the verse, and maybe I never explained this before, the verse that says, when you're a servant, you go, I did all these things you told me to do, and the master says, that's great, you're useless. Because you only did what I told you to do. I think the missing piece there is what merits the favor is that you didn't do it with that fullness of the intent, with belief, with love and joy and the fruit of the Spirit. You did it in a wrong way. You did it mechanically. All right? Yeshua was full in his mechanical obedience. He was also complete in his proper drive, motivation, to honor his Father, to trust and believe, etc. All these things are in there. So the servant, I'm going to say, that's likely. I don't remember where the verse is. We can look it up another time. But that may be the problem right there. Yeah, the servant did exactly what he was told, but he might have been muttering under his breath the whole time. Anybody know anybody like that? Maybe you've been that person occasionally. You were told to do something. Oh, tell me what to do. But you're doing it anyway. but you're muttering and you're not happy. It was Yeshua's good pleasure to do his Father's pleasure. It's your pleasure to do our Father's pleasure. Okay? So he was complete in favor and truth, as we understand what those two words mean. It says, how far did I want to go here? To 17, okay? It says that Yochanan bore witness of him and cried out, saying, this was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has become before me, before he was before me. By the way, there's a big deal in this society, and we read about it in the Gospels, this honor-shame thing where the students of Yochanan HaMatbil, Yochanan the Immerser, are really not happy that Yeshua is getting more honor and esteem than John. And John has to scold them and say, no, I'm not even worthy to unloose his sandals. You don't get it. Because they understood their relationship with John. They saw him as a prophet. They saw him as the high priest. They had him in a very high level of honor, of esteem. And then Yeshua shows up. They don't know Yeshua from anybody. I was going to say they don't know Yeshua from Adam, but I was going to say that's a different joke. Okay? Because he says he's the second Adam, okay, so to speak. All right? So, but they don't know. All right? But you see how that honor and shame thing, there's a little battle going on. And by the way, that's part of why Yahweh allows John to be taken out of the mix. It was hurting the flow. It wasn't John's fault, okay? John had already done what he needed to do. John was going to be just fine. But it was, the people were not allowing that. He said, I need to diminish so that he can increase. And he's not talking just about numbers of people. He's talking about honor, esteem, admiration, glory, whatever you want to call it. I need to be diminished because he outranks me. It would be wrong of you to give me what belongs to him. This is an important understanding of honor and shame. It's shameful to give me what belongs to him. Okay? Let's take that into a situation that I remember being involved in, and I could see where it made sense up to a point, and then it actually reversed itself. So you're going to see honor and shame play through. I'm at a conference. It's a bunch of leaders, and a student of one of the leaders is also there who's also a leader, and somebody asked that student their opinion on something, and the student correctly said, as long as my teacher's in the room, I don't have anything to say. Because that would be dishonoring the teacher. If your teacher's in the room, this is why I don't understand. You want to talk about shame and honor and dishonor? All that? That's why we had to put that post on our Facebook page that said, if the leadership is being asked a question, and all questions that go in the group are for the leadership in general, your jumping in there is a shameful act. It is dishonoring to the leadership because you are usurping and jumping in. If your teacher is in the room, and if it's my group, I'm the teacher, I'm in the room. Doesn't mean I'm always there. Somebody will let me know if there's a question I need to address. But if your teacher's in the room, why are you talking? I've sat with people that I know I'm their teacher, and someone will ask a question, someone else will jump in. That doesn't upset me. It just makes me go, what's wrong with you? Don't you understand? That's a shameful act. So I respected this student, who is now also a teacher in his own right, saying, my teacher's here. But then once the teacher said, you are free to speak, he still refused. That was not honoring his teacher. So he was both honoring, and then it shifted into shame. Because he still was stubbornly, because now he was, what was the problem? Pride. Because now it became a pride issue to not talk in front of his teacher. I'm proud of myself. I don't speak. My teacher's in the room. But your teacher just told you could speak. The military has the same thing. Permission to speak freely, sir? Yes, you may. Then you know you can. Right? In the military, that's one of the things they do. You can ask, do I have permission to speak freely? If he says yes, then you can speak freely. If he says no, then you can't. But you got to ask. And so Yochanan's trying to say, you need to understand, you were appropriately doing what you were doing with me, but now a greater one than I is here. So all that you gave me needs to go to him now. No, we love you. You're the high priest, you're the prophet. We came out here to the desert to hear what you, yes, that's great, but my job is done. One greater than I is here now. What did Yeshua do during his entire ministry all the time? He said, my Father is greater than I. Seek the Father. Listen to the Father. If you hear anything out of me, it's only because of what the Father tells me to do, and I only say what he tells. We're going to read those verses here in John. He always redirected everything towards the Father. He would, I think, be quite upset with what Christianity has done, where everything is focused only on the Son. He did not desire that. Now, it's the Father that says, worthy is the Lamb. It's the Father that says that I give all honor and glory to my Son. That comes from the Father. The Son didn't ask for it. He doesn't want it, didn't desire it. He wants to give all honor and glory to the Father. Okay? So wherever you are in the middle, you shouldn't be desiring any of the honor. You want the honor and glory to go up. And then you have to think about who underneath needs you to bestow it so they can understand it, and then they can continue to send it up. You receive so you can bestow, and you bestow so you can receive. It kind of is a flow. It's a circle. That making any sense? All right, so let's make sure we're following here. Okay? So it says that Yochanan bore witness saying, this was he who has come, and I said, he who comes after me has become before me. Before me meaning in a higher rank, a preeminent position. Okay? Because he was before me, and out of his completeness we all did receive favor upon favor. For the Torah was given through Moses, the favor and truth came through Yeshua Mashiach. Okay, so he's saying is out of his completeness we all did receive. He's saying it wasn't out of me, I'm just a prophet. I'm just speaking the word of Yah with authority. Okay, I'm just a guy doing my job. Now, of course, in today's society, we think, oh, prophet's a high title, or evangelist, or apostle. Look, they're just jobs, okay? Everybody's job is important. And he's just like, look, I'm just doing my job. But out of his completeness, we're all receiving, okay? He says, out of his completeness, we're all receiving. He says, now Moses, he says in verse 17, he says, Moses gave us the Torah. Okay, this is going to be hopefully communicated clearly. I wrote it in my notes. I'm just hoping you'll understand it. Moses gave us the Torah, which is one dimension of transformative understanding. Okay, think of that for a second. He gave us the Torah, which is a one, I'm simplifying this beyond simplifying, okay? One dimension of transformative understanding. Yeshua gives us two dimensions of transformative understanding. Okay? Truth, which is the Torah, the way to merit favor, the Father's favor, as it was fully intended to be understood and observed. That's the Moses part. But then he gave us the meriting favor, which is understanding that life's purpose is to merit the Father's favor. That's the second dimension. In other words, the motivator to do and apply the first dimension of the whole transformative thing. You're keeping Shabbat, eating correctly, not murdering, not stealing, whatever. Keeping commandments is a one-dimensional approach to transforming. It will still transform you to some degree into what he is. But you need the second part of it, which is when you watch him and you see his drive. You can see the same thing with King David when you read the Psalms, like we're reading right now with Psalm 119 as part of the challenge. You can see how he had that second dimension. It was his desire and his understanding that his purpose was to merit the Father's favor, to do what's pleasing. That's the driver behind the first dimension. So it's that deeper level. Now, I could break this down into lots more than that, but I'm making it really simple for you, okay? So when he says, look, the Torah was given through Moses. Moses gave you one dimension of this. Now, he doesn't say it's wrong, bad, and needs to be done away with. He just says it's only the first dimensional level. It's only one level of this thing. He says, but the favor and the truth came through Yeshua Messiah. He's giving us the fullest understanding of what Moses was trying to give us. How do I know this is true? Well, look at the first things that Yeshua taught. He said, it says of old not to murder. It says of old not to commit adultery. And he goes and gives us the whole driver behind it. You shouldn't want to kill anybody. You shouldn't want to hate them. You shouldn't want to commit adultery and lust and go after in your mind and everything. Because the battlefront is the mind. Okay? And so hopefully we're starting to see that. And that's where he's trying to now give. Now notice what he does. He doesn't dishonor Moses. He gives Moses appropriate honor. John says the Torah was given through Moshe. He deserves a lot of honor for that. He says, however, there is one that's greater who deserves a greater honor without dishonoring the other. Again, this is a mainstream Christian sort of challenge, right? Because they seem to think that one is somehow dishonorable, was against you, and needs to be done away with, and it's the problem. Instead of honoring both and understanding the hierarchy of them. Yes, Yeshua is higher than Moses. But what Moses gave came from the one higher than Yeshua. The Father gave it to Yeshua. Yeshua is actually the one speaking at Sinai, but it's still the Father's stuff. And you see how that kind of flows. Well, I'm hoping you see it anyway, all right? So I wrote this out in this dimensional way, like it says one layer or one dimension of it. Because remember, these are transformative things. They're supposed to help you ultimately become them. You're supposed to change from what you are to what they are. That's ultimately where we're going, right? And so that John 1:17 hopefully now starts to make a little bit more sense. He said, look, in verse 16, and out of his completeness, Moses wasn't complete, human being. Nobody was ever complete on this planet except one. And it's out of his completeness. What is his completeness? He walked it out perfectly, and he did it the right way, with the right attitude, for the right reasons, with the right drivers and motivations. The right heart. That's his completeness. When you do it mechanically without the other part, it's incomplete. A lot of people out there have the right heart, but they're not doing the mechanics. It's incomplete. You know, we used to talk about on a regular basis, haven't said it enough lately, that all of what we're doing is all about trying to become the type of person that the creator of the universe would want to spend eternity with. Are we becoming the type of person he wants to live forever with? And I've told you that I believe Scripture teaches us that it's in its simplicity, it requires two elements: Torah observance and the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? There's actually a third element. The third element is what's driving you to do those two things. Okay? And I don't think I've ever said it that way before, but there's a third element. It's the desire to give the Father honor, to honor him, to give him esteem, to give him glory. See, again, those are like Christianese words. When I call Christianese, right, words that we really don't understand. So if I just said glory, well, you don't know what glory is. Esteem, we really didn't understand that either, or honor. We're trying to define terms correctly here, okay? In the Hebrew, the root of it and the words that come out of it has the idea of kavod, is one of the words. It has an idea of weight, or there's a heaviness to it. There's a burden. There's a burden you take on yourself that you're going to live a life that brings honor. It's something that's heavy. And so when Yeshua talks about the weightier things, maybe he's talking about honor and kavod. I don't think I've ever thought of that before until I just said it. I think that's really good. Okay? Because kavod has, and kaved, which is the words that you see, have the idea of weightiness. Okay? When it talks about honor your mother and father, it has the same root. Okay? It has the kaf, the vet, and the dalet. I mean, you have the same root. And so it has this idea of it being something that there's a weight to the responsibility. There's a heaviness to the responsibility. See, this is where they were doing wrong in Mark chapter 7, which had nothing to do with what you eat. It had to do with traditions versus Torah. And he said, look, you break the Torah by saying, I'm not going to take care of and embrace the burden, the heaviness of my parents. I'm going to say I don't need to because I gave all of the money that I was going to take care of them to the temple. I'm unloading that burden. The fifth commandment tells you you have a burden that has to do with your parents. That doesn't mean that they can tell you whatever they want and you have to obey them. Obedience is not in that verse. But there's a burden of honoring them. And by the way, honor is determined by who? By them? No, by him. The Creator will determine whether or not you're doing something honorable. I can claim that you're dishonoring me and shaming me, and that's just my opinion. Societies change from generation to generation what they think is shameful and what they don't think is shameful. That changes all the time. He's unchanging. So when he gives you the fifth commandment, honor your mother and father, we're wondering what he thinks is honorable. Are you making sure that they're cared for? That their needs are met? Now, of course, you also have to remember that there's not in every, one little line, honor mother and father. Doesn't also take into account that they could be ornery as all get up and have not wanting anything to do with you, throw you out and disconnect from you. There's nothing you can do at that point. But you must make the effort that in your interactions, you're doing what's honorable. That doesn't mean you have to force the situation. But there's a burden, there's a weight. Just like there was a weight and burden when they gave birth to you that they had for you. You bring someone into this world, you have a burden that you now have taken upon yourself. And more than the 8 pounds, 12 ounces, or whatever it was, okay? I mean, you have a burden of responsibility. And then you get older and that responsibility eventually switches, but it starts off with honoring. And if you can't honor authority, like in parents, you're not going to honor any authorities, and that's really where we are today, right? If we don't learn to honor, okay? Let's go to, we got a few more minutes here. Let's go to chapter 2. We're going to stay in John today and probably for a little while. All right? In John chapter 2, verse 1, and on the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Yeshua was there, and both Yeshua and his taught ones were invited to the wedding. And when they were short of wine, the mother of Yeshua said to him, "They have no wine." And Yeshua said to her, "Woman, what is that to me and to you? My hour is not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he says to do." That's such a beautiful scene. It really is, okay? It really is an incredibly beautiful scene. We'll go back and break this down in a minute. We're going to read to verse 11 first. And so Yeshua says to them, "Fill the water jugs with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. And when the master of the feast had tasted the water that had become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called to the bridegroom, and he said to him, "Every man at the beginning, he sets out the good wine, and when everybody's drunk, then he switches to the poorer wine. You have kept the good wine till now." Now the beginning of the signs. This is the beginning of the signs Yeshua did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his esteem. And his taught ones believed in him. Now, so all of this was to start that. Verse 11 was this is the beginning of his signs and wonders to bring honor and renown and glory and admiration and public accolade to him, attention, in other words, to him. And it also caused his taught ones to believe. Okay? Because remember, his taught ones were there too at the wedding. So he's already gone around gathering some guys around him, and now they're here at this wedding. But notice what happens here. You have to understand a Jewish wedding. Jewish wedding was a week long. Jewish wedding was a week-long party. And that party meant, in those days, eating and drinking was almost always wine, okay? Easiest thing for them to make and have in abundance, available to them. No refrigeration necessary, and all the other stuff. Okay, you don't need fancy stills for it. You just can go ahead and ferment the grapes, and boom, you got wine. Now, so I'm oversimplifying, obviously, but still. All right. So at the wedding, the guy says here, normally when people aren't drunk and their taste buds are clearer and their heads are clear, you bring out the expensive, the good, the quality stuff, and you impress your guests. And then when everybody's drunk off their whatever, now you bring out the junk because they're not going to know anyway. So you just need enough good stuff until they're all drunk. And so whatever he did to the water turning into wine, he says, this is the good stuff. By the way, for all you Adventists and everybody else out there that wants to believe he turned the water into very nice grape juice, this wasn't like the Welch's or the organic one or whatever. This was wine, okay? Okay? Because nobody's getting drunk on the grape juice, okay? I've had so many debates and arguments with Adventists over this stuff, okay? Well, wine is just spoiled grapes. Well, sounds like you've got a lot of spoiled grapes. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? I apologize. I'm sorry, that's just sour grapes. Is that the better way to put it? That sounds like a lot of sour grapes there. Okay. So what's happening here is that his mother recognizes that they were short. And she goes up to her son and says, they have no wine. Now, she didn't just say, hey, FYI, just so you know, they're running out of wine. She said it obviously in an imperative sort of way that said, you need to do something about this. Okay, there was an instructional, they're out of wine, fix it. Okay? Because she just said they're out of wine. And so his response demonstrates that he understood exactly what she meant. He said, what is that to me and you? It's not time for me to be doing this stuff yet. And she was like, yes, it is. But she didn't say that to him. She went and did a more impressive thing. She went over to the wine guy and said, whatever he tells you to do, do it. She had no doubt he was going to listen. Now, he had to trust that this was his mother. She was anointed and appointed and selected to be his mother. Not anointed and appointed to be like the goddess of the Catholic Church. I'm talking about she was just anointed and appointed to be his mother, and she might have some insight saying, it's time. Now remember, she knew the students were with him. She'd seen what's been going on, and she said, no, this is a perfectly appropriate time. There's so many more metaphors about the water and what particular, by the way, they used the water, most likely was the water they used specifically for Netilat Yadayim and special water for rituals, and he turned that water into wine, and there's a lot of other things that could have been playing out here, okay? But the point was, he honored his mother, okay? In the beginning of the signs Yeshua did, manifesting his esteem and honor, Yeshua honors his mother's wishes, submits to her authority. Why? Because she had an authority level. Yes, he is the Messiah. He is the coming King of Kings. He's also her son. And so, notice what happens though. He said, not that it's wrong, not that it's against Torah. He said, it's not my time yet. Okay? And she said, well, no, actually it is. And sometimes Yahweh uses others to help us understand timing and different things. And he trusted her, because you notice he didn't argue with her. He went right over to the stone jugs and said to the guy, fill them with water. Fill the jugs with water and then up to the brim and whatever. Okay, so he just, there was no arguing. He trusted and respected what Yahweh was doing through her as his mother. Up to that point. Okay? So this is important. And so we start to see that play out. And then you see what it does is it leads to verse 11 where it says, this is the beginning of the signs. He said that he did and it manifested his honor. But not just manifested his honor, but we're reading the story. We can see it also, he bestowed honor on his mother, and then it brought honor back on him. Very cool story. Okay, very, very cool story that we see here. All right, so that's going to start us off as we're going through this journey, and hopefully that gives you enough to kind of sink your teeth into, think about, pray about. Perhaps I can make that first bullet point sheet available so people can have that little thing. Maybe I'll go make copies during the Oneg or something. Okay, so we'll have that. All right, let's go ahead and pray. Father, we come before you, and we are so much desiring to learn how to bestow honor on you. How can we honor your holy name? How can we honor the calling you've given us? How can we honor that you gave us life, that you put breath in us so that we might have life? How can we bring honor to you and honor the uniqueness and the specialness and the distinction of your calling us now and at this time? So, Father, as we journey, help us to receive the information in your word to transform us from the understanding we have now to the understanding we need to have regarding honor and shame, so that we might work work out the works and do the walking of this out in such a manner. As we say in the mikveh declarations, the 8th declaration is that we are committing to walk out the rest of our lives in such a way as to bring the names of Yahweh and Yeshua glory and honor and not shame. And so, Father, we're trying to learn how to do that. So, Father, we want to just thank you. We want to praise your holy name. We want to appreciate all that you do. And most of all, we want to bring you all glory and honor in the authority of the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.